This is just a quick update on an accessory I'm working on for the OP-80 tape reader. Anyone that's used these kits will know that setting them up to get reliable results is a bit of a hit and miss affair, and it does take a bit of tweaking of the external light source to make sure that you get a reliable read from the tape. So this accessory, as you can see here, is just a small clip-on light source. It's a series of focused LEDs within a shroud that are illuminating the tape through an aperture. I'll give you a closer look at it later on. But the important thing here is the effect it has on the reader. If you've ever tried to put a scope on the output of the reader signals, so we'll have a quick look at the schematic here, then you'll know that the input to the 555 timer is an analog input. It's essentially a voltage generated across a resistor from the optical sensor. The 555 is really only used as a comparator, and when the input voltage goes above a threshold, then the output switches state, that threshold being set by the power LED, which is why there are two LEDs in the kit. It allows you to modify the threshold for the sensor by changing the colour of the LED, because they have different forward voltages. Naturally, it would be a lot better if more consistent results could be got from the reader. Now, I didn't want to modify the reader because I specifically designed it so that it would operate like the original and look as close to the original as I could get it. So this is a removable option. It's a case of you clip it over the existing sensor, and it just picks up the power from the two front pads and illuminates a strip of tape that's directly over the sensor. It doesn't look to be on at the moment, but it is. It's extremely efficient. The LEDs are set to a combined current of 3 milliamps, and they're all in parallel, so it requires very little light, but it does need to be consistent. So I've got a scope hooked up to the input and output of the 555 timer that's on the sprocket hole, and if you've ever tried hooking a scope to these signals, you'll know that trying to get a reliable switching of the output, which in this case is the bottom trace, can be very difficult. Now, unfortunately for this demonstration, I'm going to have to hold on to the sensor because this is a prototype reader, and the light source is intended to clip over this type of sensor, which is what has been in all the kits that I've sold, but the prototype sensor doesn't have these cheeks at the end, so the the light source is loose on it, so we'll have to hold it in place. But even so, you'll still get a good idea as to how it works, even though it's not perfectly lined up. Okay, so if I just hold on to the light source, and if you watch the scope as I pull the tape through, you'll notice that the signal's extremely reliable, and it really doesn't matter how quickly I pull it through, you get a good signal. If I turn off the overhead light, so it's actually quite dark in here now, notice that the signal is still the same. So in other words, we're using this accessory, the reader is almost immune to ambient light conditions. There is a shroud over the portion of the tape that's illuminated. So what I'll do now is take the light source off, and we'll have a closer look at it, and you can see how it's put together. So as you can see, it's nothing more than a series of carefully positioned LEDs. They're shining through an aperture to make sure that they only illuminate a particular band of paper, and also the shroud will keep out most ambient light. They don't need to be very bright, and more importantly, they're all very consistent in brightness. So it means that once the current was selected for the LEDs, then the reader can very reliably read the holes in the tape, and even the differences between the sprocket hole and the data holes, which is obviously a very different size, and that's actually one of the reasons why trying to set up the ambient light conditions can be very tricky, because you need to balance the sensitivity for the sprocket hole and the data holes. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. This will be available fairly soon. It will be tidied up so that it will be a clip-on accessory to the reader, and it should make the reader a lot more usable if you use it for anything other than just experimentation.